Hello. Today I'm talking with Mark Levison. We talked about how to be a marketeer without sounding like a drug dealer, the advantage of growing your own internal coaching team, and why having fun at work matters. I'm Yves Hanoul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it.
Hello everyone, and hello Mark. I'm really happy to have you here, and let's show immediately what here means. And here means, in my case, Belgium, Europe, and we're going directly to Canada. And if I'm not mistaken, it's directly to Ottawa. Am I correct?
Somewhere in the middle of Ottawa. I'm a little further out on the western edge, but that doesn't matter. Ottawa is not large enough to matter in that sense. Unlike, say, Paris or London, you can drive across Ottawa in 25, 30 minutes if you do it slowly. So
wow. Okay. So, and just for the sake of everything, here we're talking at my end, it's 13 past 9 in the evening. And what's the time on your side?
So it's 3 o'clock in the 3:15 in the afternoon here.
3:15 in the afternoon. So we already see time zones miles away, a lot of different things. And Mark, well, you and I, we go back for a very long time. We just try to discover when was the last time we actually saw each other. But for the people that don't know you, just could you give us a small introduction? Who is Mark?
Yeah, okay. So I call myself a recovering software developer and a recovering development manager. So that's the joking answer. The real answer is somewhere along the journey. So my daughter asked me earlier in the day how long I've been in the world of software. And I tried to do the math, and her reply was, "You're ancient." Okay. Apparently I'm not allowed to do this math in public.
Wow.
Further, I talked to my wife at lunch, and she said the correct answer when it says, "How long have you been in the agile world?" I'm supposed to say more than 20 years, and everything else doesn't matter. So
wow.
I've been kicking around the agile community since somewhere not long after the beginning. I have a vague idea how I found it. Doesn't matter. I tried doing something called Crystal early on by a guy named Alistair Kerborn, and I looked around to ask questions, and I discovered that nobody else was doing Crystal. So Crystal was the most appealing to me, but nobody would talk to me about it. So I stumbled on Scrum. And Scrum, while has its imperfections, at least somebody would yell at you and tell you when you were not doing Scrum, and that beat Crystal. So I'm an agile coach and a certified Scrum trainer today because of that history.
And it's interesting to talk about Crystal. Alistair is one of these people I've talked to here. And yeah, we sometimes joke about, oh, you're one of these people who who read the book and who still has the book, because I'm inspired, and something is one of these books that talks rather early about scaling in different kind of ways. But like you say, it was kind of strange to discover that not many people were actually trying it out. So much more people were interested in Scrum at that time, and still today, I would say, of course.
It's done a takeover of the world. It's not perfect, but at a certain stage, you look around and it's like, well, I'm not going to win this one. Moving on.
Exactly. Well, Mark, let's move to that first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
Oh, okay. So it's an interesting one. And having a kid in the car next to me to talk about this stuff this morning was quite helpful. The one that I really stumbled on was my dad, because most people have not taken computing science at Queen's from my dad in Kingston. Okay, so the odds are on they don't know him, didn't know him since he's now deceased. And his influence, what really stood out for me, he would have been what you would now call an early feminist. I don't think we had a label for it at the time. He was extremely big at the time on the fact that women would get treated equally. And he was bothered in the extreme that there were no women in computing science, when I was in the 70s and the early 80s. There were not a lot of women in computing science. He was really bothered by this. By the time he was retired, as he was retiring, he was also interested in the fact that departments didn't have a racial makeup that resembled the population of the country we live in. So he was proud by the time he retired of doing things on that front. And the very last thing he did, he was doing work on, it's a bit obscure, but generative grammars, which for most normal people don't matter. But he was interested in helping preserve indigenous language, which was not something I would have expected of my dad. And yet it came out, and when it's like, okay, yeah, it's actually pretty cool. So so I guess he must have influenced me when it comes to gender equality, to racial equality, and things like that, because that's become a pretty big something I've become seriously aware of. And as the world around me pushes back at sometimes, I've become even more aware of the importance of it.
And it's interesting to hear you say that he did that so many years earlier. Like you say, probably the word feminist he didn't know, or was not a common word that he might have used, or that you would use at that time. But yeah, even then, I think it's even more important that people did it back then, and probably even less men that were doing it.
Yeah, well, there is that. I have some guesses where it comes from, but it doesn't matter. I think growing up Jewish in London during the Blitz and then after the war years had a significant effect. So.
Wow. And if you say that had an impact on you, could you say or do you want to say something how that had impact, for example, on the family that you were growing up in?
Just trying to think back. I mean, it will be things like growing up, my father co-founded a synagogue, because the only synagogue that existed where we grew up in time in Kingston was what's called Orthodox, which believes in the separation of women and men and things like that. And they have their beliefs, and I understand where they come from, but that didn't work for my father. So he co-founded a Reform synagogue. Reform Judaism believes that each adult is responsible for understanding the rules of the law and making their own decisions. I suppose from an agile sense that makes a great deal of sense, because effectively they're saying that rather than religious law being interpreted by the central authority and handed down, the individual has autonomy and is free to question the leaders. If you're well educated and you can question what a leader says, then you should make your own decision because it's correct for you, even if somebody with rabbinical authority tries to persuade you otherwise. So he found. Sorry?
I can imagine that if you grew up with a parent that thinks that way, that it definitely has an impact on how you look at the world, I would say.
One, and even now it has things like that have an impact. So when I'm running workshops, I often point people to books. I make the claim, no workshop, no matter how long it is ever going to give you sufficient depth in topic area X. So please do some reading after the workshop. I give people a book on negotiation. It's probably the well-known book on negotiation, the one by the former FBI hostage negotiator. Never Split the Difference, I think it's called. Negotiating as if your life depended on it. And the quip I make with that, and it's half a joke and it's mostly serious, is I would like all men in any workshop I give to please hand a copy of the book to all women they know first. Please get a salary equality, and then the men may read the book.
Wow.
It's a little bit of sarcasm there, but there's a little bit of truth there. And the truth is we got a problem. And I expect everybody around to take a little bit of responsibility to fixing the problem. And if we all shoulder a small load, probably things will get a little bit better.
Yeah, I fully agree. And that's well, just multiple small examples of how indeed that had a big influence on you. Because yeah, like you say, yeah, many different ways that your father influenced you in looking at the world, and that has looks much more at people are as equals, but at the same time that we still need to do the work to make sure that everybody else or that the world treats them as equals in many different ways, I would say.
Yeah, well, that's the hard and ongoing problem. It's easy for any individual to see the equality. Sometimes the problem is, of course, the systems we're part of don't actually support the individual equality that we all perceive.
Yeah, and then yeah, how do we act on that? And that's yeah, but it's it is hard. It is a hard problem, and it's not some problem that any of us alone can fix. But like you say, we all need to take our small little steps in doing that. So thanks for sharing that, because it shows a very important parts of well, both of how your father influenced you, but how you look at the world, and what we need to do to make things better.
Well,
Now, yeah, go ahead.
for fun, later on, I'll touch on systems thinking, and I think stuff like this ties into systems thinking. If we wish to make change in this game, we have to know where the levers are and where the buttons that we can press to make the change.
Oh yeah, because that's one of the things we learned from system thinking, that it's not always because we push one way that it's changing in that direction, and there might be counter actions that are happening more or less automatically. That's one thing we learned from system thinking. Well, I want to move to that second question, that if you had not been doing what you've been doing now, what could have become of you? Do you have any idea? Was there anything that you were destined to become, for example?
Yeah, so this is another one of those ancient moments. Um, um, I don't know, because I've been on this path since basically the first time I really seriously thought about what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
So I'm old enough, perhaps a year or two older than you even. I'm old enough that when I was, I think the first time I got a programming course was like in grade 8. So before
Mm-hmm.
before most of us start thinking about what we want to do, I had a programming course. I quickly outpaced the material that was available in the course, and so just started playing around and teaching myself how to use stuff. And to give you an idea of how long ago this was, we were using TRS-80 Model 1s or Model 3s from Radio Shack.
Wow. Okay. That
Yeah,
gives indeed an idea for the people who are more or less our age. I've never had one of these, but I do think I had yeah, older people at school that had some of these. So indeed, I think you are a little bit older than I am. But yeah, it shows us a little bit. And so um, this is interesting, because what you're saying is that even at that time, because probably you were still rather young, you already had an idea you wanted to move into IT. Is that what I'm
yeah.
hearing?
So I guess two things that would help. First of all, for the non-American listeners, grade 8 meant I was about age 13. So at
Hmm.
age 13, I knew what I wanted to do for a living. Yes, by comparison to most of my peers, that's early. The other, the probably the source of influence, again, my father. He was a professor of computing science. So I
Hmm.
had been exposed early on to the idea that there was work called computing science and that people could actually be paid for programming.
Wow. So even at age 13, you didn't just see it as something to play games on something to play, but also as, oh, I can actually make a living in that.
Well, but there weren't a lot of games. I mean,
Right. True.
Pong was a game. And okay, I did play a game with my dad. My dad introduced me to a game that was playable on the early DEC PDP 1103 that he had in his office, and then later on in the departmental VAX when VAXs existed. It was called Adventure.
Hmm.
Some people will know Adventure as something that turned into a 3-part game called Dongeon, but we actually played the original Adventure, and we played it together on his computer.
Wow.
So
And and I'm not sure if I can actually show this. Let me see if I can bring that up, because Where
Actually,
is
do
my...
you know what is Zork?
Yeah, but I was trying to bring something else on screen that is, because you talked about, and where is my mouse? There is my mouse. You talked about Pong, and that's a little bit how it looked like in these days, huh? Just
That was,
having,
yeah.
so that is just, you have to, yeah, play the ball, which is the little dot in the middle from one side to the other, and that's how you play it on computers these days. That was called a game. If you compare it to the games we play on computers these days, it's completely different, of course.
Well, and it's funny. So as a result, I mean, I grew up with that, and I grew up with text-based adventures. So if you offer me a game that's text-based, or maybe the fireproof game type people, the people who give you very interesting logic puzzles you can play on your iPhone, where you follow clue after clue after clue and then solve puzzles, I found that interesting. If you invite me to play a first-person shooter where my reflexes and my dexterity are going to be the win, I'm sure you'll have fun, and I think I'll go find something else to do for the time that my friend is doing that.
Interesting. It's yeah, but that's also because at that time that was a little bit the possibilities that we had. I don't think that these computers at that moment would even be able to do a first shooter. Definitely not. So that's interesting at that level as well. So, but that's really interesting that you, as an age 13, you already had an idea on where you wanted to go, and at the same time, it's not really where you ended up, because, like you say, you're in the agile space, so you're not really a computer, like you said before, recovering programmer. I'm not sure what the exact word was.
I call it a recovering programmer. It's just a bad joke to get people to smile for a half second.
But if you look at that, was there anything, like you said, you run into these kind of things? Do you still consider yourself working into IT, or do you see that different these days? Because some people think, okay, agile is only just for IT, others be broader. How do you see this?
Well, for agile, for me in particular, or agile in general? I mean, for me in particular, probably most of the time I get hired to work with software organizations. But that probably speaks more to my background than it speaks to agile in general.
But I like that, because that answer, because in that sense, what you're saying is, or at least that's how I hear you saying, maybe that's not what you want, but that's why I want to check, is that you say that if you want to use agile in a certain environment, that the people who are coaching you or helping you, it's good that they have a background in whatever field that you're working on. At least that helps you. Is that the correct way to see it?
Well, there are trade-offs. Let's play in the software space for half a second. Someone's in the software space and they don't know software well. Okay, I can see them being an effective coach. They better have miraculous skills with regard to perhaps behavioral psychology, systems thinking, and something else. Then we could accept a trade-off, because the trade-off for being the coach, well, they may not know the software side, but they then have a decent understanding of enough else, and they bring enough else to the table. But I would then invite them to at least go and learn to play at a surface level in the software world.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is that, well, in most of the cases, you and I, we both work with other people, might be other coaches. I like when at least one, or well, a few people in the group of coaches know the field that we're working in. If it's software, that there's at least a few people that's written some software, or, like you say, played some, but some people also really know it really hard. And it could be something else for accountancy or whatever that you're trying to do. Is that something that you share, that feeling, or you say no, as long as they...
To a degree, but just for fun. I've seen people show up in the software space who don't have a software background, and the benefit they provide us is they've got a perspective that's different, and they're able to remind us that some of the behaviors and the norms that we're accepting as okay are in fact considered a bit weird in the normal world. And could we all grow up for a second? So
right.
It's a harder road. A non-software person showing up in a software world is going to have to work several times harder.
But basically what I said was that I like to have at least some people who know it, and you say kind of the same thing, but for the opposite reason. People who don't know it because exactly the same thing. We want to have that perspective, and from coaching perspective, it's good to have a few people who know it, and you say, and at the same time, it's also important to have people who actually show you a mirror and say, well, wait a minute, we're still grown up, and let's behave like that in a way.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. I'm just going to try and shift something on my computer, see if this makes there, that should be better. Okay.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of the same thing that we're saying, but from the different angle, I would say.
Yeah, so I have recently been through one non-software company I've been dealing with. The thing I've had to learn with them is I've had to learn to double down and learn in their space. I have to go and understand their language, and they wind up having a different language and a different, almost short form. And so you have to learn to go and to speak the words they speak and understand roughly what they mean to make sure that you're not breaking something with your advice.
Right, and that's always important that we understand each other well, and it's usually easier from my perspective to try to learn the other language than to convince people to speak my language. Of course, that's the other part, and especially, well, I'm of course thinking more business language or whatever the thing, but it's the exact same thing about real. Languages, other languages that we're speaking, of course.
Human languages. Yes, you have greater facility in that regard than I do.
Well, you're from Canada, where at least you have also two official languages, I would say, no?
Yes, but 75% of Canadians speak one official language.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know.
Okay.
I actually don't even know the percentage in Belgium, but probably higher. That we speak both languages, because we actually, for the people who don't know, in Belgium we have 3 official languages, which is Dutch, French, and German. We don't even have English as an official language. But strangely enough, in the Flanders, the Dutch part of Belgium where I'm from, we learn. So my first language is Dutch, my second language is French, and the third language I learned at school was English, and only the fourth language was German, which is actually an official language. So yeah, that's the whole crazy thing that we have in Belgium when it comes to languages.
Well, and it's funny. I would have thought, so you don't call the Dutch Flemish, you call it Dutch in that case.
Depends who you talk to. Actually, many of the people who are, there are many people who would call it really Flemish, and because it's a little bit a different accent, also a little bit like US English and UK English. There is some kind of thing that is some accents and some words that are different. But I prefer to call it Dutch because the language itself officially is Dutch that we learn in Belgium.
Interesting. I did not know that. Okay. I learned today.
So yeah, well, that's why I kind of interjected a little bit. It's not about you; it's just about me. But it's also something that we learn. That's part
fun.
of.
But it's fun, and this is. I mean, now I get to write down this evening, so I journal every day, and I journal every day something I learned. This will be something I learned today.
So I'm happy to see what else we can learn. So let's move to that third question. What is your biggest challenge today? At least the challenge that you want to share out on the internet, and why is that a good thing for you?
Well, it's easy. So it's currently marketing. The downside of being self-employed, and having not being part of a bigger system that feeds me work. Is that I actually have to do my own marketing, and that's a challenge. Details don't matter, but COVID changed a lot of variables, and some of them have chosen to rest in a significantly different location than they did previously, and I've got to adapt. Now, stuff happens, right? I mean, nobody gets to complain in this business. Nobody has a right to say, "Oh, woe is me." Stuff happens. So the benefit, the good, is that well, I suppose the other way to frame it is everybody and their brother now claims to be an agile coach or an agile trainer. And saying I was around in the early days doesn't actually cut it. That's not marketing. So I've had to get better at the marketing. The upside of that is you get better clarity on what it is actually you'd like to help people with.
That's actually a very good point. The better we, marketing is about, okay, what do I want to give to people? What can I bring? But it starts with ourselves. What do we want to do? And that's an interesting part of that equation, I would say.
Well, and it comes, so part of better marketing is you have to sit down and ask people what hurts. And then you make an exhaustive list of what hurts. And then you find a way to make sure that you can demonstrate you solve most of their problems.
Most of them. Okay, you don't even start with just the first one. You want to immediately have an answer.
There are no miracles, so you shouldn't overpromise. So you have to be careful about declaring miracles. But aside from avoidance of declaration of miracles, you actually have to help people. But nobody will buy something. You'll buy a book if it contained one good idea, maybe. But if you're going to pay more than the price of a book, then you need to know that the thing you're paying for that costs more than the price of a book solves more problems than you would have got solved for $20.
That's an interesting thing to I didn't think about that, but I kind of understand it. Indeed, that's if you only solve one thing. But I was more thinking about, okay, if people give you a list, I would look like, okay, if you give me a list, let's see what is the biggest problem, or what is the easiest thing to solve, and then get to the next thing and the next. But like you say, in the beginning, before they want to even to work with you, you kind of have to say, well, I cannot just do this, but I can help you with more of your problems. That's kind of what I'm hearing.
Well, yeah, it's also probably part of the difference of our current business models. So your business model is more a coaching model, and so you get to spend a longer time on average with most clients. Most of my clients start transactional because they would like to buy help in a specific area. And only after, gee, you helped us a lot move the ball forward. We like you. Your style is good. Your sarcasm is okay. We get along well enough. We should do more of this. And then you can move from a transactional model to a long-term relationship model. But then for the transactional model to work, I have to do a job of showing that the framing is careful. I will provide you the tools. Were you to take the advice I take, roughly speaking, and actually take most of the steps involved, you could independently on your own solve a number of the significant problems you have and move a ball forward. If I do a good job of that and I make inroads in solving enough problems, then somebody should be willing to pay me a reasonable sum of money transactionally for that to work. Okay.
I like that. I like that idea.
Long run, if it was really good and the experience was pleasant, maybe the person or the corporation would actually be happy to pay me for an ongoing relationship.
That's that's the long game, I would say. Like Alistair says, we're playing the game to make sure that we can keep playing.
Well, but you also sometimes have to help people in transactional situations. Sometimes, even if somebody wants long-term support, they're not in a position to get long-term support. If their corporation or their own pocketbook only can afford to pay X $1,000 for knowledge, you have to meet them where they're at the moment in time. And even if later on what they really need is the longer term support, if they're not in a position to take the longer term support, it doesn't matter what's ideal. We have to meet them at the moment where they're at.
Right.
I should be very careful. I'm beginning to sound like a drug dealer.
Well, as long as you're solving their problems long term and they're not getting indeed addicted to you, that might be the better way. But yeah, if they're getting addicted to you, then we're going into that other direction, I would say.
Well, I'm thinking more. I sound like a drug dealer because I'm being honest. The fact that many people need coaching support, um, which is, I think, a strain that has been running through the agile community for about 20 years. The complaint is 2 days is not enough. The complaint's fair. 2 days is not enough. On the other hand, 2 days is sometimes all you have. So both statements are true. 2 days of learning, whatever label you put on it, is not enough. Nonetheless, if you've got humans and they're only able to give you 2 days, how far can you get them down the path?
Yeah, but I think that's big part of our industry and how we deal with it. We need to, like you say, we need to already kind of convince them in the beginning that we can help them with a lot of stuff. At the moment, typically, then we don't know anything about their situation. We know what they tell us, but usually what they tell us is not the real problem because they don't see the real problem. Because if they did, they would already solve it. That's a big part of that equation as well, I would say. No?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they do see the real problem, but they may not be in a position of influence to solve it. So in which case they're seeing the real problem, while fair and valid, is not sufficient because they are not. I mean, I can imagine so a team level scrum master or coach can see the real problem is not at the team level, it's in the compensation or review system. Okay, as much as they want to try, until they've delivered significant results at the team level, they're not going to have the influence to actually solve the underlying problem in the system.
Right, but then it's also hard for them to, I would think, to bring you in at the right level to take action, because sometimes part of the problem, or at least that's what I see as a coach, and maybe you have a different opinion, but for me, part of that problem, then the way you described it, is making sure I enter at the right level, that I have the authority and the trust with the people where I need to make the influence, I would say.
Yep.
And if the people that contact me don't have that influence, it's also hard for them to bring me in at that right level.
Absolutely.
But that's where marketing comes in again, and then we're going full circle.
Yeah. I mean, there are. I think part of the trick is, in the long run, I really think the best way is to build the credibility of the people on the ground. So the people on the ground can be demonstrated to be knowledgeable and capable on their own, and then they're the ones influencing the management. They're doing it over a longer term, and then the management is willing to make the change because they get feedback from their own internal systems. Right. Sometimes what happens then is I get brought in as the shock wave. Sometimes the local person does the groundwork, and then they bring me in, not because people like us have magnificent, brilliant knowledge that nobody else has, but because we have a stamp of outside authority, carrying a label in my case, and the label then means something to these people, and that gives me a ability at that moment to provide the nudge and the hint that your current behaviors are not working.
Yeah, that's, like you say, the outside behavior. That's something, yeah, we a lot, and I think in a lot of cases as coaches, we ask a lot of questions to understand the information, and sometimes people tell us like, oh, but I've said this and that already to the people that need to hear it, and for whatever reasons they didn't have that stamp, or people didn't listen to them, and we kind of repeat the same thing, sometimes with better words that people are listening to us, but sometimes literally the same thing. And for whatever strange reason, people listen to us. And while strange, it's probably about that outside view, about that stamp, and a few other things that are happening.
Sadly, the stamp seems to matter a lot in the world. Having whatever labels we have after our name, and the labels that say we have authority in this area, gives us street cred, and we can debate for in infinite time how fair these labels are. But I'm perfectly willing to leverage the label to influence people to make better decisions in their systems.
Yeah, it's yeah, like you say, it's sometimes sad, but if it helps them at some level, and that is probably a hard time sometimes for internal people to accept that the fact that we're outside, the fact that we have that stamp is helping them, and the part is, for me at least, to make sure that they trust me to share the thing, and then I can help them solve their problem. And for me, it's also important that then, as much as possible, to share back with their managers or whoever is in charge that actually the information was already in your organization, and I could help you listen to the people that I actually listen to, and then it comes back full circle again. I think then it comes back to what you said earlier on, making sure that that people listen in their organization, that they can do it on their own, and that we can move on helping other people, I would say.
Well, I try. I'm not convinced how often it gets heard. I try to tell them that at the end of the day, the best way to do this stuff is to build your own internal coaching staff. The number of good agile coaches at any moment in time, as opposed to random people who just label themselves agile coach, the number of good agile people out there is not huge. You're probably better off growing your own people internally, slowly but surely, the nice boring way, than you are hiring for advice from the outside.
And well, and then trust, and indeed, like you say, train them, because it's not because we give them a stamp or that we give them a few books that is enough. But yeah, it kind of also shows a little bit some of the things that that's going to that next question, is that you're a very passionate person and trying to help people. Do you know where that passion, do you know where that drive is coming from?
So I know where it comes from. Well, so I've worked on some great teams over the years. Some before agile was a word and our behavior wasn't hugely agile, but the teams were still fun. Some of the teams were agile and they were fun. And one of the teams inside a corporation that will be renamed nameless, check me out on LinkedIn. It wasn't fun. And so I look around at work and I've realized I get sad when I see people who aren't happy at work. I get sad when I see people who are disengaged. And so, and look, so you can see individuals or you can go read your Gallup survey. And either way, the information comes back the same way. There are a large number of people who are fundamentally unhappy at work. And some of them are so fundamentally unhappy that they move from the state of not happy to active sabotage. Like when no one's looking, they'll throw a brick through the window. And that's not fun. So the drive for me is, well, okay, I know something about making work fun. Whether one becomes an adherent to Scrum, XP, Kanban, Alistair's Crystal, DSDM, if anybody out there is still doing that anymore, or one of the other ones, don't care. I care about what tools do we have and what knowledge do we have that can make work interesting and fun for people.
And big surprise, when people have more fun, usually whatever they deliver is not usually, in most cases, is way much better than if they don't like the work. I think that we kind of know, but at the same time, I still meet managers who are worried when people are laughing and having too much fun in the meeting. It's like, oh, don't you have any work to do? Well, maybe we're still working, but we can still have fun, and while we're working, we can still laugh and still be serious at the same time. It's it's sometimes sad how people think that cannot be combined.
Well, I mean, I'm a geek. I think you might have figured that out over the years. I read academic papers for, I'm not sure if that's pain or pleasure. So
a combination or two.
I'm always interested, what makes work meaningful for people? What can we do to make work such that you choose to do the work because you enjoy solving the problem. And I mean, yes, you need to be paid. Don't worry. We all need to be paid. But I want to find out, what is it about work that can make work meaningful to the point where you actually come to work in the morning thinking about doing the work because it would be fun to do the work today. Clearly, part of that is meaning. I'm doing a little bit more digging at the moment. I found a ridiculous new sounding word today. I still have to get my head wrapped around it. It's called benefice, I believe, which is the idea that you can see that something you are doing, or something around generosity. I haven't got the definition memorized yet, but the gist of it is you want to see that your work has impact on other people. And if you can see that, because you talk to them, so Agile Manifesto says business people and developers should meet on a daily basis or something. Okay, well, that would seem to deliver some form of benefice. In a boring mechanical trick, I'm overjoyed in a sprint review when a team member is able to get some one-on-one time with a stakeholder. I think that can be effective, but I'm actually just open to any way that we can get more knowledge and preferably more human contact from the customer world into the people doing the work world, so that the doers have a deeper understanding of who that they're benefiting. I'm kind of hopeful that if I keep on pouring that in, eventually I'll make a positive difference. And eventually the federal government of Canada will go from being a place where people grumble about how they work to commenting that many of these people actually seem happy. I may be a naive young optimist.
I'm not sure which part is more funny, naive or young. But yeah, I agree there in a sense that a lot of what we do is trying to help people to make to be happier in their work and to as a result deliver more value for each and everyone. And I think, well, I think most of coaches, we need to be naive one way or another if we want to keep helping people. If we would think it's totally not working, then we would probably very easy than a lot of other people would do it. So we're somewhere in between. For our customers to understand, I would say, even if we have read all the papers and all the things that proven it, there is lots of data in the agile world about that is. Let's move to that next question. What do you consider your biggest achievement so far? And actually, the question below is an interesting one as well. This is your moment to brag. So my question, Mark, is it easy for you to brag?
No. So I got a cringe. So answer number one has already been deemed cringeworthy. Nonetheless, I will share it. I will not name who said it was cringeworthy. Child number two. Aside from getting two, so I joked. Aside from getting two girls most of the way to adulthood, that I think is the bigger achievement. That beats any of the work stuff.
And of course, children, they don't understand it until they have their own children, I would say.
Well,
something like that.
This one has sworn that that is a zero likelihood event, so perhaps never understand that. Okay. That's fair. So biggest achievement, I don't know about biggest because I find that hard to quantify. I could look at a client where I've trained a large number of humans and helped them, and I can see the effect over time by the different quality of the questions that come back. That's not very satisfying. So different angle I came up with is satisfying. And for me, satisfying is I've got a couple of small client companies where leadership's made real change over the years I've been working with them. And to the point where, so I run events called Lean Coffees. And I don't know if your whole world knows what a Lean Coffee is. So quickly, a Lean Coffee is, we get together. I set up, in my case, a Zoom session where people come and hang out. It can be anybody around the planet. I even get some I even get some Europeans occasionally come hang out in North American time zones. They come hang out. People post on our board the questions they would like to ask. The audience votes on the order that we work on them in, and then the audience bids how long to work on each problem. Okay. I had somebody who I know was a fairly traditional manager when I first met him. Decent person, but traditional management skills and knowledge. And he came to a Lean Coffee a while ago and he asked, I've got a team member going on short-term disability. Everybody on the team is aware that our expectations on throughput are in the short term lower, so that we've done our best on that. But how do I coach them through working through the short-term disability? The pride for me is, wow, what an awesome change. I'm willing to bet that's not the question that I would have got X number of years ago. I don't want to speculate on what question somebody would have asked X number of years ago, because that's probably unfair to the person. I probably grossly misread whatever situation was. But what a change, where your biggest problem is not the mechanics of Scrum and not how do I deal with team, but I got someone going on disability. How do I support?
That is indeed, and then coming to indeed your Lean Coffee to ask it out in the open, because Lean Coffee is not a one-on-one coaching, which is also means that people already dare to be that vulnerable about such a situation in an open space where they might not even know everyone. Is that a correct assumption?
Oh, they don't know anybody. And his first and last name together are on Zoom, and they're unique enough that it wouldn't be tough to look him up on LinkedIn.
Right, indeed. So that's even harder. It's not even physically; it's remotely at the same time. So that makes it even harder for some people to do that.
Well, and as I say, just like, okay, I'm blown away. That's because a lot of the questions that come up, and that's fair, I get it. A lot of the questions that come up are at the first order Scrum level for teams that have less Scrum experience, less Agile experience, and they're around mechanics of planning or sprint review or better refinements or basic level stuff. And it's good. It's good people ask them. That's awesome. But here I am. If those basic level questions are like first order, this feels like third order.
Right.
Like, yep. Okay. I'm sweating. I don't have for the first order stuff. Often, so Lean Coffee is an exchange, and I always try to get multiple people to participate, so it's not just my voice being heard. But that means while I'm doing it, while other people are participating, I can go find articles on my website that might be supportive or reference sources for people. Again, being a geek, I have a joke. I maintain the world's largest opinionated Agile glossary and reference library.
Wow.
No, be careful. The opinionated part is my get out of jail free card. If somebody else has a larger one, mine's more opinionated.
Okay.
Anyway, silliness aside, it means that when I'm in something like Lean Coffee, somebody asks a question that's core Scrum level or second order. The odds are on I have a glossary entry that gives them some supporting knowledge, and yeah, they get the question answered in the conversation, but more importantly, they get the follow-up material they need to go and read offline afterwards privately and dig into further. My friend who asked the question about disability is like, jaw drops, jaw shatters on floor, jaw recovery. I don't have prepped material. Gotta react.
Wow.
That was satisfying.
I think that's like you say, this is when it's third level where it's not so much prepared. There is no standard answer, and there is no standard material. So we really have to think about what could be a good way, and and maybe in a couple of years we will have more answers to these kind of things, because that's also part of our world, I would say. I think, the fact that you have that large library with all these answers, opinionated answers, is also because you had lots of these questions, I assume.
Yeah, well, so the library started out as in my workshops, I have this bad habit. I finish the workshop And I want to share with everybody, oh, just one more thing. If only you read this one more blog entry from Smart Person X, who's written about very interesting subject in the following way, you will be 10 steps further ahead on your journey. And the problem is every time I wrote that email, it got just 2 links longer. Until one day, I got a note from Google that I was blocked from sending emails for 24 hours because I'm a spammer.
Wow, because you were adding so much links to these kind of things.
And so Google said, well, that's clearly spam. And so then I turned it into an online reference library. And for a long time, that's what it was. But the problem is it was just a list of links on my website. And it came to the point where even with subheadings, it was unreadable. For most people could not follow my link library. So now we have a glossary. But that's just made the problem worse. I think at last check, we're at 180 entries. Most entries have both a bit of text describing, at least in summary, the thing, and then they have 5 to 10 sources that they link to that I recommend you read to get further knowledge and depth in the area.
And so you're creating your own Wikipedia before you know it, and then you need more people to maintain everything that you write and every tagging and everything. It's a little bit.
Look at the upside. There's no ChatGPT.
Not yet. Maybe you need to. Maybe you need to implement ChatGPT on everything.
No, I'm going to be authentic until I'm done going around the sun. I think I'm going to work on authenticity.
Okay. Well, that kind of brings me also a little bit to that next tip, or next question. Do you have a personal agility tip to share? And I think the authenticity, being authentic, is part of a lot of what you're sharing already.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, a couple of things that come to mind. Read widely. So agile is boring. At least for me, I'm being a little bit facetious. There are clearly some good agile books and material that still come out, but I've stopped reading about most agile subjects. But I read about a whole bunch of other stuff, so read widely would be one. But I think just as importantly, be critical. Just because you read something doesn't mean that the person who wrote something did their research, was right, interpreted the research correctly, et cetera, et cetera. So read widely, be critical. When doing so, please take notes so that when at a later date you read something that disagrees with the original source, you can go back and say, I believe original source to be correct because I read it and here's the viewpoint I took on it. Or I believe the new thing to be correct because I can prove the following logical thing. Okay, so read widely, take notes.
I like that because well, I think both of us we're a fan, or we at least know Laurent Bossovitz, who wrote a book about some of the stuff that we have in the agile community, and well, not just in the community, but in general, where actually he kind of, well, I don't know if it's the word debunk, but he really went into detail to find out where is that coming from, where is that coming from. I'll definitely link to his book as well, because I think it's a very important one where people really learn to think about, oh, this is an interesting concept. It was written about an author that said something like, I probably think it's that. And then 3 articles or 5 books later, it is that author has said that this, and that's the authority, where actually in reality that author says, no, that's not what I said.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, one of my favorite ones he debunks the myth of the 10 times programmer.
Right. That's one of these really important ones that's in this book.
Yeah, I like that one. So in the same vein, I have a hobby horse. A bunch of people in the community believe and spread myths themselves. I beat one to death for a number of years in the Scrum trainer community. I think I've probably taken care of it by now. Learning styles. Everybody and their brother says, oh, people have a learning preference or style. Somebody learns better as an auditory listener, or somebody learns better as a visual. No, nobody uses one more than the other. These work a lot because you've got more processing power donated to your eyes. Your ears work less because, well, sorry, folks, there's less processing power in the brain devoted to them, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? You can't separate them out. So anyway, I'm deeply passionate about that. We'll go off the deep end if we go down the rabbit hole of agile myth or myths in general that I know people hold on to. We'll go down a rabbit hole. If anybody's ever bored, from time to time on Mastodon, when somebody like Brian Marick asks me a question and says, "Attack this myth, please," and I'm bored and I have some hours on my hands, I go and take apart the myth because it's fun.
But I think this goes really to the essence of what you started to say, is that read broadly on all kind of topics, and not just on a certain people that you know, but read many different people on the subject, and you'll learn a lot more. And yeah, for me, I think both of us, we read a lot, but I don't always. For most books, I don't take everything that's in there. I usually take one or two ideas, but indeed, I like to read multiple books then on the same subject to say, okay, what do I believe? Where do I do? Where is some of these ideas coming from? And I think you wanted to add more than just this part of it. Is this correct?
I'm with you. I'm to the point now where with some books, if they won't footnote, I don't trust them because I can't tell what their sources are. There's one author prominent in the team space, and he says he doesn't footnote because his readers don't want it. Well, that's fine. Your readers may not want it, but then I can't trust your writing because I can't trust why you make interesting claims. Many of them I agree with, but I can't tell if your advice is on the money or if I'm just sitting in it. Possibility 1, new information I haven't come across before, I should pay attention to. Possibility 2, echo chamber, I'm paying attention to information I've already seen, but it isn't more important because somebody else has repeated it. Possibility 3, new information but incorrect, and I can't prove it because the person hasn't cited sources. So it saved me some money. Disappointing because the person's a good summarizer, but I can't trust them because I can't tell where.
Yeah, I think that is important to we need to trust the sources, and when we talk with people, we want to learn more, and if people don't want to say certain things for political reasons or because they're afraid of their own customers, of their own readers, then okay, why do you even try to spread messages? Because I'm interested to learn where you learn from. It's also interesting that indeed sometimes people don't share their sources for whatever reason. It's always interesting to see where that is from.
Well, I think his comment was that his readers didn't want it. And that's like, okay, well, that may be your belief set. But then this reader, and I guess I'm not an important reader for this person. That's fair. But as a result, it just means the person had to move much lower down the trust level for me. It's like, well, then why am I taking this information in? Because it occupies my brain. It causes me to go think, maybe, but I can't trust.
But if that's true, if it's just about the readers, well, maybe you share that information there somewhere else on a blog or whatever, another book. But yeah,
I think I have a guess, and I won't go into the why. I think it's just for some people that's a lot of work, and so be it. And he doesn't find that important to put in, and I do, and so be it. I think for fun, the other thing that I found in the past year and a half, 2 years, that's made a big difference for me. Every week I hold not a sprint review in retro, but something like it. I keep on adapting this. I take a note. I use an online tool, but frankly, you could use a written journal. Every week I review my past week. What did I accomplish? Even highlighting the small things. Okay, so I'll make notes. So I do this on Sunday evenings for about an hour. I'll make note on Sunday that I spent a couple of hours coding with our youngest daughter, who's interested in learning to program. And so I'm teaching her to do test-driven development. Because I figure the odds of the school system teaching her test-driven are 0. So, okay, fine. Well, I can probably do this. So I'm doing that. I get to note that. And that's a good way of lifting myself up no matter what happened in the week, because some hard stuff happens every week. You go look and you go celebrate the good. And then you note the things you'd like to improve. And then I design one experiment for the upcoming week. And then I even have, this shouldn't be readable, but it gets one across. I even write on a folded index card. The top half of the index card is work. The bottom half of the index card is personal. I get to do 3 work things a week and 3 personal things a week.
Wow. Okay. And that's you design that at the beginning of the week, at the end of last week. How should I see it?
So I Sunday night I review everything. Sunday night I review the previous week. I review where I am. So every 8 weeks, roughly, I set down a bigger action plan for the tiny organization that I run. I track how I'm doing towards the bigger plan, and then I plan the week against the bigger plan. Am I still working towards the core goals for the 8-week period? And then in the personal world's a bit more ad hoc. Mostly I'm just adapting to things I notice in the personal world. Like so the last one I have was around messaging for one of my workshops. I was to improve messaging. We've made okay progress this week on that. I'm to do some SEO work. While I don't love SEO, for better or for worse, if you don't do SEO and you're a web-driven business, you're dead. And then it turns out I need a new credit card, so I need to go sit on a bank to get that. And then on the personal level, I have a minor injury I'm dealing with, so that's up there as a list of things to work on first. There's a book we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and I want to take notes on that book. And then I'm unhappy with how much I worked out in the previous week, so I've set to myself a goal of 3 workouts.
Wow. So that's something you do every Saturday night. That's how I understand it.
Sunday in my case, but who cares? Do it whatever night of the week.
Yeah, but that's every week. That's actually what I wanted to say.
Yes.
So that's yeah. I've done that for a very long time. I don't do it now, so maybe I should review that and do that again. For me, it's also what I've learned it actually from Dr. Coffee about let's plan the big rocks in my week. What are the important things that I want to do? Because everything else, all my other time will be filled. So I need to plan some stuff that I really want. So that's indeed, and I do look at my week every week, but I don't do the planning at that kind of level that you're doing.
Well, it's sort of evolved by accident. So I listen to a bunch of podcasts. So I don't know which software platform world you live in these days. I moved back to the Mac a couple of years ago, and I started listening to some Mac-related podcasts. One of them on the edge of the Mac world, 2 people, a guy called Mac Spark, he calls himself Mac Sparky, and his partner in crime, Mike Schmitz, have a podcast called Focused. And in listening to their podcast, I've come across a number of interesting ideas around journaling and weekly reviews and things like that. And just, I keep on, you hear ideas, you hear what other people are doing. It's like, that makes sense. And I heard about this thing, and it's like, well, that's kind of like an agile sprint review and a sprint retro. Oh, well, I advise teams do that. Oh, then why am I not doing that? Oh, because I didn't think of it. Okay, well, inspect and adapt.
Exactly. Yeah, but I like it. And like you said earlier on, you want to learn from different kind of sources. We talked about books, but actually it's not just books, podcasts, there's other kind of things where we learn as well, I would say. I want to move to that next question about remote work. I think you did already some remote work before COVID. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I think I'm snowflake case though, so I don't think I'm not convinced much the world will learn anything from me, because I've been self-employed for 13 years. Pre-pandemic, I was either, I mean, yes, I go to client sites, but a lot of my stuff pre-pandemic was virtual. Not workshops, but if somebody wanted an hour of conversation, I'm not gonna drive across the city of Ottawa to have an hour conversation, park my car, pay the cash, turn around and go home again. And since I don't spend a week on end typically at a client site, it's not like I was doing a lot of that. So I think my world is a bit different from most. I don't spend a lot of time at client sites. Therefore, my interactions in a week are my operations manager, who mostly does the job of making sure that the world around me runs smoothly so I can do stuff. Thank you. Okay. I have a couple of business collaborators. They're awesome, but we meet infrequently. So my remote work is probably very different from most people's.
But when you do that, for example, I like the last example where you say I have some kind of business partners where you have some kind of, well, I think you meet remotely in many of these cases. Is there anything that you've learned about these kind of meetings that help and that is good for other people to learn about, or?
Not yet. Not that I'm trying to think of it.
No, but it could be okay. Yeah, but I'm trying to see, because I see a lot of people that sometimes think there's nothing that we can learn, and then if I ask a few questions, and sometimes we find things that.
Okay, maybe one or two things I have learned may be useful. One, so everybody uses Jira or Trello or something else these days, because that's I think pick a tool. Probably save yourself and don't use Jira. But anyway, okay, I'll freely admit my colors in that department. More practical. We use Miro or Mural a bit to play around with ideas to visualize them. I think the value of visualizing ideas is underestimated. I think both Miro and Mural are painful tools, so I won't tell you which one to use. I use one for a week. I come to hate it. I go back to the other, and I realize the other is differently evil. So I don't know about that. I think the surprising thing we found is having a shared note-taking tool is very useful. But I don't know how applicable this is to everybody. So a few questions ago, I said, you should take notes when you read. Okay. Same token, we're developing new material as a core group. We're calling our little group 3% Better. It's based on the rough idea that I've been sharing for years with people in teams. Whether you say every sprint or every month doesn't really matter to me, but the Scrum Master or the coach's job or whoever, there are no miracles. Your job is just to coach them to a little bit better every sprint or every month. And by the way, if you did 2-week sprints and you got 3% better every 2 weeks, turns out that you get a hell of an improvement year over year.
Yeah, I would about saying if just 1 or 2%, but is already really good. But if you go through for 3%, then it's just wonderful. Well, I personally, I don't even care how much percent. If you improve every time, then it's the iterative part, and it's the what is it called, the compound improvement that really makes a difference. And of course, the higher the percentage, the better. But what I've noticed with many people is that they want to put their bar very high. Okay, let's this time now improve 10%, but then it's not sustainable. Then you cannot do it week over week or sprint over sprint or whatever. I much prefer every day to improve, maybe just even 0.5% or 1/10% or whatever. But if I can do that every day, that's a lot more than just 1% every week or something like that.
Sure, if you do 1% every day or even 0.5% every day, you are going to get miracles. I'm not going to do the math off the top of my head.
No.
I've got the math for 3% better memorized. It came out of an idea to show people so 3%, it's a little bit silly, but it was chosen because if you do it every week, 3% better over the course of every sprint, if you do it every sprint, 3% better is 2.03 times better at the end of 24 sprints, which is realistically 1 year. If you do it once a month, 3% better is 42% better year over year. None of us clearly believe that any of this stuff is actually measurable, but it's conceptual to get across the idea there aren't miraculous improvements.
Yeah, I think that's the real stuff. It's just making sure that we have small habits of improvement every time, and that's the only thing that we can measure. Do we think that, and even there it's a guess, but do we think that we improved this time? Okay, do we improve? Did we improve? That's the probably the only measurable thing that we can have.
Right. Yeah. Part of what I want with 3% better is I want people to realize a working agreement, for example. It's not going to get you a big improvement. But a working agreement, if you use working agreements successfully, multiple sprints running until you normalize a series of behaviors and they become the team, culture, whatever label you want to provide it, that might have been worth 1% a sprint over 5 sprints. I'll take that. Okay. In fact, for fun, a game. So the last time I've coded, see if this chat mechanism works. Oh, I can't chat. Okay, wow, there we go. I wrote a game, teamsgame.agilepainrelief.com. You're going to discover I'm not a writer. I'm sure as hell not a JavaScript coder, but it's on the 3% better idea. The idea is you start with a team. The team has some initial base capacity to do work. Every sprint or every cycle, you can select the improvement you seek to make with your team.
Right.
But you don't have enough capacity to make all the improvements. And then you run the game. And if the game, the game said your boss will yell at you if you don't do enough user story work. No actual game effect, but they'll yell at you virtually in the game. The idea is to show people, if you don't make a certain class of improvements, you will be destroyed over time. If you don't make engineering improvements, after some number of sprints, you will be ground to dust because your engineering quality is so poor that you can no longer do new work in your code base.
Right, and which is something that we see in real life, but unfortunately, it takes a long time before we see it, and we don't always realize the effect. And in a game like you have, you can probably show it in 5 minutes if you change this parameter, if you change that parameter.
That's the gist of the game. I haven't found a way to make it popular. If you have a hint for me offline to popularize this game, I will buy you the beverage of your choice for the rest of your adult life.
And we're back to marketing. We'll definitely put the link in the show notes to talk about that and to see if people can think about it. I want to move to that next question. We talked about, or we tried to talk about remote work, which was kind of hard for you. But I think this is one of your favorite questions, I would say.
Yeah, this is my wheelhouse. So the problem for me is not what book have I finished, what books have I finished lately? I mean, so we mentioned this, we were chatting a recent while ago, but it's still sitting in my mind. I reread Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke.
But before you said that, you said something nice in chat or in mail before you say, I wanted to show this. I'm not sure if you recognize this, but I hope that it was the joke that right.
Oh, yes.
What was the joke about?
So every time I hear about limiting whip, a Devo song goes through my head. Now, everybody in my family makes it clear I am not allowed to sing. But the key line in the Devo song is whip it good.
Right, so, and indeed, the joke that I was referring, or that you were referring to, was indeed the whip limit on number of books that you're reading at the same time. I think that was.
I'm awful. I keep track of my books in a currently popular note-taking tool called Obsidian. I'll save us both by not opening up that rabbit hole. because we might not emerge there until tomorrow morning. But if I were to if I were to honestly mark every book that was in progress as in progress, the tool would come back to me and complain it could not be reasonably displayed inside a sane size note on what I please bloody well grow up already and prioritize.
But yeah, but I think a lot of us that, well, what I recognize in there is that I sometimes start a book and then maybe realize that, oh, wait a minute, I don't have energy for this book right at this moment. And I might go back to another book, and sometimes it's a new or sometimes it's an old. And I think that's a little bit on what you were starting to say about this book, Thinking in Beds, which from what I understand, you read already before, and now you're rereading, or you just finished rereading it. Is that how
I've reread it with the intention of taking notes, because she shares enough stuff in there that I didn't know before I came across this book that it was worth taking extensive notes. Some books we read and it's like, yep, nod, 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 yep, met that idea before. Thank you, subtle detail. We'll take your subtle detail, but not surprising. A lot of stuff she shares, I mean, it's things like there's a whole class of errors we make called fielding errors. A fielding error can be, I made a lot of money last month. I am a genius. No, maybe you were lucky. I did very poorly last month. My luck was bad. No, maybe you were a fool.
Right.
There's some form of misattribution going on, and she calls it fielding error. Now, she is a former poker player, but she's also a PhD behavioral psychologist. So she uses knowledge from one world to explain the other.
Yeah, that's what I like about it, that it's not just pure theory, but it's how she's using it and the examples that are in there. It's a wonderful way of opening, well, our minds, I would say, with some of the examples. And sometimes, like the example you gave, it's yeah, I can see it with other people, but I don't always see it in myself, because that's a little bit how attribution works, in the sense that when we think about ourselves, we think, oh yeah, we're so much smarter than other things.
Well, I think the thing we can all do is we can all say at all times, okay, that result is nice. Before I say that how I got that result, let's step back and see if we can examine how it came to be. So and this kind of leads into the next book I mentioned. So a lot of us, there's too much. I can't speak for other people, so I will say for me personally, too much of my self-worth for a long time was tied up in how I was doing in business and work professionally. And I've had to let go of that a lot, because the pandemic changed a lot of the equation, and all of a sudden things that were easy and previously successful are hard and less successful. Yet I'm not any different a human than I was pre-pandemic. So, for bonus points, I don't know about you, maybe walking on the treadmill, which I think you do a fair bit still. I don't do it to the degree you do. Okay. Sorry?
Yeah, no, I was about to say I'm standing on the treadmill, but I'm not walking on purpose, because some people have told me if I do it. Actually, the interesting thing is that for the people I'm talking with during the interview, most people don't mind. They find it actually okay. But for the people just watching the interview, it's a lot more distracting. That's why I'm not walking at this moment.
Of course.
But yeah, you say some more. You were talking about the fact that indeed you felt different, or at least that things were changed during the pandemic. But really, you as a person, well, you probably have changed, but not that drastically as how it felt.
Right. Well, and so, and also during the pandemic, because I'm sitting in front of my desk more often than like, I wind up checking things more and more often in ways that are clearly not healthy. checking email constantly. You don't know how hard it has been to sit here for an hour and 40 minutes and not have an email program open.
Wow.
Haven't done that yet, but temptation is high. So I made the interesting discovery. I heard somebody else on a podcast reading this, talking about this book, How to Calm Your Mind by Chris Bailey, and they talked about burnout.
That's this book, right?
Well, it's just funny. European covers of books from real publishers are different than North American covers. It is that book. Okay, I find that funny because the cover of my copy is red. Were you don't need to look that up on Amazon.ca, but were you to look it up on Amazon.ca, you'd see a different cover.
Yeah, usually I try to pick multiple. If I see that there's multiple covers, I try to pick multiple covers. Which the interesting thing is that when I looked up this book, that I actually found lots and lots of different books that had something about how to calm your mind on, and then a subtitle, how to calm your mind on, and so it was kind of hard to already find just this book from Bailey.
Right. Well, you did. Well played. So Bailey suffered a burnout moment on stage. He's a professional speaker, and doing a reality check. As a trainer, I'm a sometimes speaker at conferences, and even as coaches, I think we're all professional speakers to some degree or another. And he had a moment on stage where his brain went on the fritz. And I went, oh yeah, I think I recognize that. And so you read through his journey, it's like, oh yeah, okay, check. I've got all these little check marks. Yeah, so I realize I've been going through a bit of burnout in the past 2 years.
Wow.
And it's like, not healthy. Okay, time to start to figure out. And of course, this is coming at a moment where there are some business challenges. So it's not like I can easily just say, oh, whatever, I'll just put the entire world on hold for 3 months, turn off my brain, go walk around the planet and go recharge. And when I come back, everything will be shipshape. First of all, that wouldn't work. Second of all, I can't do that. So it's like, okay, so
you're like you said earlier on, for the people who didn't pick that up, you're self-employed. So if you would do that, and especially in Belgium, we might still have a little bit of safety net, but in most other parts of the world, there's totally no safety net if you're self-employed. So
yeah, if you're self-employed in Canada, you're not paying into unemployment insurance. So in any case, unemployment insurance doesn't actually pay enough for people to live on for very long. So we can debate why that is and whether or not that's morally a good thing. Doesn't matter, it isn't. So as a result, I'm having to do a lot of reflective work. Self-reflection is good for somebody in this industry, but boy, oh boy, is there there's a lot of self-reflection going on. So,
and do you have help with that self-reflection, in a sense? Do you have coaches that are helping you, or the people that
not yet? No, probably would be wise.
Yeah, but I'm asking because I see a lot of us sometimes struggle on their own. I've worked with coaches over the year, I think for more than 20 years, but with different kind of coaches. So I'm almost never with the same coach for years and years and end. I'm using multiple things, but I've noticed that especially when things are really hard, like within the pandemic, that it's been really helpful for me to, I'm not saying to avoid to go into that state, but at the same time to make sure that I realize at the moment that things are really hard, that maybe it's not just whatever, but maybe it's just the situation is hard for.
That's a really good reflective question. I haven't gone there lately. So the core of the book is around building resilience, because his point is burnout comes when ongoing or underlying stress in the system exceeds the resilience or your capacity to deal with stress.
Okay. Yeah, there definitely was a lot harder during the pandemic, I would say.
Okay. Well, okay. The underlying stress of what's changed in the economics of my world is not going away. Okay.
Right.
The old world is past. It doesn't matter whether or not I or anybody else wants it back. It's not coming back. Fine.
Right.
Okay. So the underlying stress is going to be there for the foreseeable future, unless I do something boring like quit and get an actual job. Since I'm probably not employable at this stage in my adult life, that's not on. So therefore, I need to build the resilience into my own world that I am able to deal with the underlying stress. That's a journey. That's a journey and a half. And seeking outside adult help might actually be a wise idea. Hadn't it had been framed to me in a different way, in a different context, and I hadn't thought of it here.
Yeah, it's
Thank
but
you.
that's it. You're welcome. It's something we don't always think about, and yeah, that's why I'm asking. The goal was not to
No,
make you think at that level, but at the same time, it's yeah, I couldn't resist because I
well,
know.
I appreciate it. And let's do a reality check. That's probably, I mean, I would never do this, but you hear people joke, and it is true to a degree. You hear people joke about solving problems like this by just having a drink. And it's like, no, I think I probably need to, I mean, avoidance, no, but I think I actually need to cut down on the number of jokes I make in that department myself. I used to make jokes about that. And it's like, now I don't anymore because I realized the jokes are actually exhibiting something unhealthy for me.
Right. So that's definitely another part that I see with the. I don't know enough, or we don't see enough for each other to know how big that could be a problem for the jokes and everything around that. But I definitely know some people where when we talk to them, sometimes saying like, "Wait a minute, you kind of make that kind of jokes, whatever this or another kind of joke, so often that maybe there is some truth in it, and maybe we need to look
Yeah,
into."
well, I'm not sure if I ever took it to the point where I shouldn't, but it's like now it's like time to stop making those jokes and make my jokes somewhere else.
Right, right. I get that, and yeah, I really like. I want to go back a little bit to the book and what you said about the releasing the stress. I noticed that so before I started work, I lived a few years of welfare. And so that really meant I totally had no money. And so even before I became independent, I always was very worried about having a safety net and having everything. And at the point that many people said over a lot of years when I was independent, like, Eve, that's way too much and whatever. But I've noticed that safety net, that it really helped me knowing during the pandemic, like, okay, if something goes really bad, like the pandemic, I was still able to work, but I also knew that I could have, not had worked for a year or two and still be able to live off the safety net I had, not spending a lot of money. But that's another part that I've learned. Creating the safety net, I created by not spending a lot of money. So I have that balance on both sides. I probably need to learn the opposite, like getting an ease and on maybe sometimes spending a little more money because I sometimes I'm too, not enough at that time. But it gave me so much, released so much stress during the pandemic when I saw so many other people really getting stressed on some of these things. And I think that's something. Well, what you triggered with that book is really like we need to look at ourselves, or that's I don't know if that book's helped with that, but for me, it's what you when you talk about it, it tells me like we need to look at what brings us stress and what would help us to feel that stress less. Is that what all the idea of the book?
That's part of it, but he's also he shows you what introduces stress into your world. So, example, for many of us, Facebook is in fact a source of stress.
Right.
You go on, you read on Facebook, everybody posts the best moments of their life in Facebook, and you go and read about it, and then you compare the best moments of everybody else's life with your own life,
which is never the best part, of course.
Right. So one, but two, prior to the existence of Facebook, how many friends were you in regular contact with? 30, 40, maybe 50. So the most you could be bombarded with was bits of information from 50 people.
And never same day.
Right. Okay. On Facebook, you might scroll through the best moments of 100 or 200 or 300 people. So,
and some not even good friends. I mean,
right. So now you're receiving information from a lot more sources. This causes stress for your brain. Clearly, there's some good. It is nice to smile when you see something from somebody you haven't seen in years, and you think, oh, it's nice to see them doing well. But he's teaching you that that's a source of stress for your brain. For me, at least for the short term, and even the medium term for other reasons, Facebook is just a no-go. Twitter, this was easy. I deleted my account on Twitter for 152 reasons, and stress wasn't even in the first place. And I won't name it the silly new name. I deleted my account when it was still actually Twitter.
right.
But even Mastodon, which is at least not an algorithmic timeline and not trying to feed me stuff to excite my brain, even that can be bad if taken in an overdose. And don't worry, I've done that already. And I've not been on Mastodon long enough to have actually had a lot of practice with that.
But I recognize that. Well, I haven't used. The interesting part is I didn't delete my account on Facebook, but I even know the exact moment on 25 May 2018. There was a new there was the GDPR rule that came into practice in Europe, and Facebook. I was actually working at a client working on GDPR rules and everything for months and months, and then Facebook decided to change their policy on the exact moment that the law came in. I was like, what? Most companies have been working on it, have been preparing and helping with their customers for months, and then they did it just on the day itself. And I was so fed up that I said, no, I'm not going to accept this. I don't even, some of the things that were there were for me not even compliant to the things that I was learning at my company. So I said, I'm not accepting it. And so ever since, I can't use it because I didn't accept it. The interesting part is, since then, I thought, oh, I should delete my account, but I can't delete my account because I didn't accept that I wanted to go in. So I'm in a kind of strange situation where people think I'm still there, and I hear from my partner and other things that people tag me and whatever, and I can't see it, and I can't even say no, don't tag me or anything because I didn't accept these kind of things. But every once in a while, I don't know, you go for a website with news article and you click on something and it still opens Facebook where I didn't realize it, and it's like, oh no, because I still didn't accept it, and it's like, okay, I go on. And I kind of like it because that way I'm kind of still forced to think really hard. Did I want to do? And yeah, sometimes I miss a lot of events, people, and unfortunately I also missed that a friend of mine died, so I didn't know, and then people were like, why didn't you know? Because that was sent by Facebook to a lot of people. But for most other things, I'm just like, yeah, I don't worry too much. Indeed, a little bit about what you're saying, it was probably giving stress at multiple kind of levels.
Sorry. Family members just outside my office door, the joys of working from home. Although with a spot of luck, the microphone didn't pick it up much.
I didn't hear anything, so maybe that was picked up by the recording, but I'll check later.
It's a good thing then. It just demonstrates paying a lot of money for a good microphone actually has some small advantages.
Yeah, and indeed, but it's I really like that you stress that we get stress from things that we actually think we enjoy, but like you say, it brings the whole internet has some big advantages. We can have this conversation, for example. That's for me a huge advantage, that we don't have to leave our house and we can still have the feeling of connection. But at the same time, it brings in a lot of more stress that we don't always realize that wasn't there 20, 30 years ago. And I think, well, if I just look for myself, we are learning to deal with these new tools while they're getting invented, and they're improving to get more of our attention, where actually we say, wait, maybe I want to give less attention. And that's that's a constant stress, I would say.
Well, and trust me, I am now problem aware, but I have not actually found my solutions yet. I still carry a large square piece of glass in my left-hand pocket called an iPhone. I often reach for it at moments where, on reflection, probably leaving it in my pocket would have been a beautiful thing to do. I'm getting better, but it's no, the progress in the journey is slow. Anyway, that book, How to Calm Your Mind, has been useful. It's helping me recover from burnout or avoid it. I'm not sure if I hit it or I'm recovering, and it doesn't matter. I even think, for fun, there is an angle on teams. He mentions in passing in the book, there's a well-known burnout inventory named for the woman who invented it. I'm not going to get a last name right, so I'm not going to try. But she talks about how she was working with one company as a client, and she'd run the burnout inventory for her team, for a group of teams. She read the results out for the audience, and they were stunned to discover that people thought they were alone in their feelings of burnout, and they make the stunning discovery that most of them have actually been suffering burnout together.
Wow.
Now, it turns out that in the context of work, solutions to burnout probably wouldn't shock you. They involve better focus, probably better quality vision, probably removal of pressure, and a variety of other things. I mean, none of this would shock anybody in the agile world about what fixes burnout in the context of a team. So don't read it for that. If you choose to read the book, read it because it will help you as a human. Agile team effects are pleasant side effect, not the primary purpose.
Yeah, well, for me, one of the things I've noticed is that I think in some sense also agile can make burnouts worse, in the sense that or at least that's how I seem to think about burnout, is that it's usually the people who are really want to engage and really want to do good that turn into burnout. And that's agile really gives us every week or every 2 weeks a new opportunity to do better.
Sure.
And then it's like, okay, we need to protect ourselves too. And this is what I like so much about the original book, or one of the books from Ken Beck, where he talks about the 40-hour work week, and to make sure that we, the sustainable pace part, because it's very tempting to keep working and to keep improving, and we made a commitment and we want to do it, but wait a minute, it's sometimes dangerous, I would say.
Yes, it is. And I think you're right that there is a risk that the ethos we create, if we're not careful, can accidentally create unsustainable pace. People need to build in safeguards against that. Again, this book only goes so far as the effect on you as an individual and then helping you. I think there is a vein to be taken apart for teams.
Okay, but I was more thinking about not specifically the teams, but more like, for example, product owners and burnout. I see because for the reason why I'm worried. Well, first of all, I've seen a lot of product owners going into burnout, but also because if a team goes really well and you only have one product owner to support that team, that's very tempting to overdo yourself. But it's case by case might be completely different. Well, I think go ahead.
You probably would need to sit down with the person and look at what their sources of stress are, because they'd be individual. Maybe the person's sources of stress are actually largely not at the place of work, and in which case, no intervention you design at work is going to affect how they're doing in the burnout game.
True. I'm only focusing on the work part, but you're right. It's almost never only at work. It's mostly, like you said about the pandemic and everything, there's a lot of reasons for stress.
I'll give you a super quick example. So in workshops, so in a Scrum Master workshop, I give people a coaching problem. Your product backlog isn't getting updated. And I give them a story around it, and it's the story of a product owner And there's enough clues in there. The product owner could either be didn't understand the job or a bunch of other things. But one of the points I make to people when you're coaching this, maybe all of the problems maybe all of the guesses you've made at the team level and at the org level, congratulations. Maybe you've missed the entire point. Maybe what's going on in this person's world has nothing to do with Scrum, has nothing to do with the org. Maybe the problem is something going on elsewhere. And no matter what you do, until they tell you what's going on that's causing them this much stress and this much trouble, you can't help them.
True.
And maybe the best we can do is at that moment hold space for that person, give them the safety they need, give them the space they need to go find a way to make their situation better, and create a humane place for them at work so that when they're at work, at least it's not making things worse.
Yeah, I think that's his important part that you add there. And we need to make sure that we pay attention to the full thing. And so if people are, well, what I'm hearing is that this book is really helping with that particular part to understand where the stress is coming from. I know that you still had a bunch of books because you sent me
infinite supply. Don't worry, it's an unwinnable game.
Exactly. You sent me some books today, and before you sent me some other books. Actually, some of them were the same. Is there one more that you still want to talk, or you think like?
We'll just mention it as a teaser. I've just started reading a book, Teams That Work, by Scott Tannenbaum and Eduardo Salas. Yeah, and for once the book cover is actually right. Demonstrating that for once a publisher had agreed that the cover should be the same across all countries. It's about the science of teamwork, because I'm really curious, what does the science have to say? If you've been in this field for 10 years, so far it's not a shocker. But I think what it's going to do is it's going to help me sharpen some things that I hadn't articulated well enough, and it's going to help me make sure I have intellectual rigor behind things that I had been saying for a long time. Already one or two little details that I don't love. In an attempt to make everything tie into the letter C, they've turned in things into, I would like team members to have common understanding of product vision, product strategy, product priorities, and they turned that into the word coordination. It's like,
right.
Yeah, okay, I guess. That's cute, but really, could you just have not used a better word? And then they used another word, cognition, and when I read it, it's like, oh, I get what you mean, but I wouldn't have called that cognition. But, whatever.
But that's sometimes also a little bit that people want to write a book and they want people to remember it, and then they find acronyms or they find words that everything is with a C. But like you say, it's not always. I've been helping in a few how would I say it, community projects where we translated some books, and sometimes we run into these things like, wait a minute, what's that actually meaning of that word? And of course the word games that they play with having acronyms or with having everything with the same letter doesn't work once you start translating.
Of course it doesn't.
But even there, just trying to understand what that word means is sometimes you feel like I would have called it a different word.
Well, so effectively what you're saying is that most people are in fact not Bill Wake. Most people are not capable of writing a word like invest. Although, Lord knows, you're going to tell me now that invest doesn't translate to French or Dutch.
I didn't even try. That's actually a good thing to think about. But from what I understand, even Bill, he had some versions of it before it came. I read once a story about how we came up to that. I don't remember anymore, but I think
I know a story. I won't claim it's the story. Here's the story I know, and if you find out differently one day, you shoot me an email and tell me how I was wrong. The story I heard was that Bill needed an acronym. He had a rough idea, and he locked himself in his house for a couple of days, and he spent the days playing around with letters and words, until he could come up with an acronym that works.
That's a little bit the story that I remember. Indeed, that so he didn't just came up with it. He actually worked hard to make sure that he had a list that that worked, and so yeah, that and looked in different kind of things. It used to be on his blog. I'm not sure if it still is there, but yeah, it shows a little bit to what you were saying, is that he invested, to make a pun, in the time to find something that that can work, and even there, I think sometimes some of the letters are confusing. I think some people, I don't remember anymore, but I saw a few people using different words for some of the letters.
I hear you. Oh well. Anyway, so this book I think will be good. I had reason to be sitting in a government office. Turns out an hour and a half before it opened this morning, because we got there thinking we were only going to be half hour before it opened. And we were in fact quite a bit early before it opened. So I read a chapter and a half of a book while sitting there on, thank the Lord for an iPad.
Yes, then we can have everything with us. Yeah, when typically before you would have to take a lot of books with you all the time, and you wouldn't have them with you at the moment that you actually had time that you didn't.
Oh, don't worry. I have, since this was a trip to a known destination for a known time, I'd have had a book with me and a stack of index cards.
Yes, indeed. That's but then the book is out, and whatever. That's at least how I had it in the past. That I think I have a book, and then I have way more time, and then the book is finished, and I don't have another book. Before phones, and before we had e-readers and everything like that. So I usually had a couple of books with me, and then of course by the time all of them were finished, I didn't realize it. Anyway, I want to go to that next question, which is for me one of the most interesting ones, especially with someone like you, because I know you have been thinking about lots of different things. We have been talking a lot. Is there a certain question that I didn't ask you and that you think, oh, really, Eve, you should really ask me this question?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I have a rough answer, but I give it some thought. I was tempted to make a joke around, you should ask around what's the best music, and I could make a Canadian musical joke. But you know, that's just lame, and it would fall flat. In any case, my musical tastes aren't relevant to anybody in the world, so let's not worry about it. I mean, the thing I think that people, not that you didn't ask, because we've touched on a lot of this, but I think people should be thinking about more than just agile. Agile's nice, congratulations. You read one book on Scrum, good for you. You've read, thank you, please go read Alistair. Go read one of Alistair's books, just because Alistair's books are different. Congratulations, you've read another book. Now go read a Kanban book. Okay, you've done a great job. Agile is probably boring for a while. Unless you're pushing the really bleeding edge of like the continuous discovery stuff. Agile is now boring. So then I thought, well, what would I want people to think about? So this kind of beats the stuff I play in my game. I want people to think about engineering practices. So please go dig into engineering practices so that people build quality. Since I'm a Scrum guy, this will come across as truly insane. The XP people had roughly the right idea. So just go and copy and paste everything from them, and that'll be a hell of a good starting point.
Well, I want to go a little bit on what you just said about the Scrum, well, making kind of a joke about being a Scrum guy. For me, the very first book I read about Scrum, the black book with all these colored letters.
Yes.
There was one sentence in there that said something like technical excellence. I don't remember the sentence anymore, but I do remember I've read that book multiple times, and I do remember reading it. And so it actually, right from the start, from Scrum, for me, they said like, you need technical excellence. And I do remember talking I don't remember with Jeff or Ken, I don't know, but talking about it, and basically the answer was like, yeah, extreme programming has solved that part. We're just doing the extra part on it.
Right.
But unfortunately, we're now so many years later, and people just see Scrum and they forgot all about extreme programming.
Yeah, and so first of all, I think they've both said that. They refuse to add it to Scrum, claiming that if they add this to Scrum, the risk is that they'll then make Scrum impossible in non-technical environments. That's a fair problem. But then I wish somehow we'd built in, and to be fair to them, I don't have the answer. I wish there were a severable addendum at the bottom of the Scrum guide that says, if you are working in a software environment, please investigate the following practices. They will benefit you. If you are not working in a software environment, cut this piece out and leave it on the floor. It does not make sense to you. Okay.
Well, the thing is, this is what I referenced a little bit earlier in this conversation as well. For me, the technical excellence, well, there is the extreme programming part for technical and programming, but I do think, or I have the feeling that we need also technical excellence. I don't know if you do it in marketing or if you do it in accountant or whatever. There is also some technical excellence in these environments where we are. It's just not it's not extreme programming. It's something else. Or do you disagree?
Sure. But here's the thing that we haven't figured out yet. So, technical excellence in the extreme, and we should get there. Much of the technical excellence in the extreme programming world relies on bits of automation to do things repeatably so that things happen with more speed, more reliability, under promise of the same thing over and over.
Right.
Okay. Pretend you have a marketing group whose job it is to create web pages. Might have had a client, okay, where they were doing promotional work where the marketing material needed to integrate photographs, video, written material from a variety of sources, all of whom don't get your material on the same day. What do they automate there? I know what a continuous integration environment looks like. We all know what a continuous deployment environment looks like, or continuous delivery, if we want to make that framing. We can probably, the technical people can probably all articulate a good story around behavior-driven development, on automated acceptance tests, or some flavor, some naming, some sort of something of that sort. What do these marketing people have that is the moral equivalent of that supporting framework? I don't know.
Yeah, and this is where you said we still discovering some of that stuff, of course. I agree, but I still think we need some kind of excellence, but we don't have the solution there, I would say, and especially the automated version of it. That's
right.
Which is indeed a very important part of how extreme programming made itself better, or at least kept itself in the game, I would say, by having all that automation.
Well, I think it's where you get your sustainable quality from, because if you make a nice, beautiful Martin Fowler refactoring, and you've got a good test automation suite, you know that the change you just made is a safe change. These people change a web page. They don't know that their change to the web page. Maybe they just changed a headline that something was anchored on. Now they've broken an anchor link. That's a poor example. That should be self-evident. But there are some changes you could make on a page that would break something somewhere else in the system, and the breakage wouldn't be self-evident.
Right, and probably some of that then we create, tools that will help us create these pages, and that's the part. But then we're into a completely different kind of ball game. That's a different thing, I would
probably
say.
A little bit outside of my skill area this week, at least.
Yeah, but yeah, it's and we're not going to solve it here. That's for sure. But I think it's good that we as a community think about it, because if people saying agile doesn't work outside of the programming world, it usually is related to these kind of discussions. And I think the answer for me is it's not working. It's more like we don't know yet how to have better solutions to the problem that you just said about how do we automate some of that stuff so that we can check.
Well, I mean, so it's a ways away yet, but we can see it because you can see. I mean, so the problem of anything you read is it's probably out of date shortly after it was written. But 5 or 6 years ago, we had stories of Saab with their work on the Gripen fighter jet being done in a very Scrum-like fashion. There's a book you can find on LeanPub by a guy named Paulo that goes on at some length on the subject. Okay, there's that as an example. There are other examples we can find agile in non-software environments, and frankly, that particular example is like blow the socks off. It's like, wow, they really went all in. There's a whole book on agile marketing. Hacking Marketing by a guy named Scott Brinker. Okay, so people clearly do this now. There's now a book on agile HR.
Right.
I haven't bought it yet because at $45 or $50 Canadian, I'm going to need somebody who's in client pain for me to go spring the cat. Unfortunately, a book like this is a book. I open it, I read it for half an hour, I flip through it, I get the point, and then I stick it on the shelf and say I know where it is when I actually need it.
Yeah, that's a little bit how sometimes we read books, or at least how I sometimes read books, is make sure I understand some part of it until actually I need it. And unfortunately, sometimes we need to buy the book now, because by the time we need it, it might be no longer be available. It's different with electronic versions of books, I would say, but paper books, I've already come across that I said, oh, I flipped through it, I know more or less, I'll buy it when I need it, because I don't want to buy 10,000 books. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, the book is no longer available because it's a paper book that the publisher had decided it's out of print.
Wow. Yeah, luckily that is less and less a problem.
Yeah, it's I think less a problem with everything that is available in a digital way, I would say, and that gives us also the advantage, like you said earlier on, you can read it anywhere you want at the moment you want it, and yeah, share some things about it. So it's been a wonderful, again, these kind of conversations back and forth. We're learning, I think, both from each other, having these kind of discussions. I really like it. Like, yeah, it reminds me of the old times, and we're, I don't know, sitting at whatever conferences, and we're just discussing for a long time, typically in a bar late at night.
So this is healthier.
This is way healthier. Well, I'm a person that hasn't been drinking alcohol for a long time. So for me, it was possible to keep discussing for a long time. But still, I was losing sleep, which turns out not to be that healthy either. There was actually a really good book about that too. I want to move to, for me, also an interesting question to ask you, because I know, well, you have that network, you have lots of people that you think I should talk to. So who do you want me to talk to next?
Well, this will be one of those ones where we can go and just one more, and then just one more. So we'll start with a few and see how many you have capacity for. So I've started collaborating recently with two people, Anil Jayasingh and Bernie Maloney.
And let's see if I can bring either of them on. And I think this is Anil, am I correct?
That's Anil, yeah, you've got Anil.
And so why would I invite him? Let's start with talking a little bit about him.
Anil comes into the agile world from a technical perspective. He was coaching DevOps work at a big New York-based bank, and I don't know if he says out loud which one it was, but it's okay because I'm not going to remember, because I don't spend any time in New York staring at banks, so I'm not going to know where he worked. But he did that. Along the way, he fell in love with training from the back of the room. And so he helps people with DevOps training from the back of the room and all of the core Scrum stuff.
Right, and that you casually mentioned training from the back of the room, which I think both of us we kind of like as well as a way to teach people. And so when you encounter people who learn about that brings in another thing, I would say. So thank you for also mentioning that. You had another person in mind. I already forgot the name. What was the name?
Bernie Maloney.
Bernie, yeah, of course. And I think, let me check. I think this is Bernie. Am I correct?
This is Bernie, yes. Okay. So Bernie has a better product sense than I do. So I want to be careful how I phrase this. I have a reasonable supply of expertise on what it takes to build effective teams and enough to do a good job for people. I'm not bad at product ownership, but it's not my strength. Teams, my strength. Product ownership, good, but not amazing. Bernie has what I don't have. And Bernie, for bonus points, likes playing with org problems. So Bernie likes helping leaders get unstuck from organizational issues. So we're building a triad because we each have different strengths.
Right. So that brings in all kind of things where, again, what both of us like to work in a community, to work, to collaborate with people and to build on our strengths, I would say. That makes it indeed a very interesting person to talk about, to learn from different kind of sides. Well, you said, let's see how much capacity you have. Let's bring in at least one more person. Who you want to talk next to?
I don't actually know how to say her name correctly so I'm going to make a guess, but forgive me if I get it wrong, and when she should forgive me. Anu Gopal, and she founded Africa Agility. Yeah.
That's Anu, I think.
Yeah, you're right. That is who
you pronounced it correctly, but indeed, I hope she's been on my list for a while. She's been invited already. I think Bob Galen invited her, someone else invited her, and she finally said yes. But so far, we haven't found the time to actually have the conversation.
Oh, okay. So I get a mulligan then.
Again?
A mulligan. Do you know that term from golf?
No.
It's called a do-over.
Ah, right.
Let's have some fun. So, completely different. Whether or not, let's see, need to get the correct spelling of their last name. Do you know Toby Almen?
Yes. Toby is, yeah, I haven't, I've invited them. So far, I didn't get any reaction, which is interesting because I've been talking with Toby for multiple different kind of things when there was a reaction. So for this, I'm not sure if I'm used the wrong email for inviting them.
I'll ping Toby and see what the response is.
I really have great. I just talked about having us conversations back at Agile conferences. I have really good memories of well, talking and even spending evenings with Toby, even with GB Rainsberger, yeah, years and years ago. Some really playing ping pong and then dancing and talking and almost all night. It was really wonderful person to be with.
I think I figured out the other day from a comment Toby made. I met Toby in 2007 at the Agile Alliance conference in Washington, D.C., when the conference was still small enough that they could hold it at a normal hotel and not one of these monstrous convention hotels.
Wow.
So but I'm thinking that may have been around the time, I don't know when you first hopped across the pond for an Agile conference, but that may have been around the time.
It's, yeah, I kind of forgot when it was the first time. I definitely was in 2007. I was there. In 2008, 2010 was also one of the years I was there. But then 2010, there was already in the Disneyland or something like that, I think.
Yes.
So that's definitely, and I think if I'm correct, 2007 could have been the moment that they've been to Canada at some point, because I think
2010 was Toronto. 2007 was DC. 2011 was Chicago, and I'm going to forget the other ones.
I was thinking that Chicago. No, 2010 can be Toronto because my partner was with me in Toronto, and 2010 I was. I think you just missed 1 year. I think Chicago was 2010 and 2009 was Toronto. That
Okay, fine. You're probably right.
But it's in that kind of order, definitely. And these were and Toronto was, yeah, I brought my partner with me because we did a workshop on leadership with Lego. Both of us together in Toronto was really nice at the French edition of the conference, because there was some kind of track in French, which was interesting to do at that time.
So we deluded you that people in Toronto speak French. What you may not have realized was that nearly everybody in the Toronto area is Anglophone.
Yeah, I knew, but that it was interesting. I think the Americans thought, oh, we do it in Canada, and then we have a separate French track. But there was actually not many people interested in that track. It was not a large room, but it was still interesting because it was, well, the interesting part is having doing an agile game at the conference. For most of the tracks, that would have been way too many people to be in a room to bring. I needed to bring Lego across the pond, so that was not easy. So I didn't want to have too many people on it, because I didn't want to. Well, I just had one. I think we had 2 suitcases of Lego. That's about it, what we could bring with us. So, but that I had almost no clothes with me for the full week because everything was Lego with me.
Of course, yes.
So my backpack was my clothes, and everything else was.
I must admit, so I've learned 2 things in this regard. So there are people like you who are willing to travel with Lego, and I've learned to do all of my games with paper and tape and glue and things like that, on the grounds that you can carry enough supplies that are paper-based for just about any game, and it might cost you half a suitcase at most.
Well, the thing is, that Lego game was one of the first games I created that was really successful, and indeed, I didn't like it for years that I had to bring all the Legos all the time. So I really decided after that all my other games will be with a lot less material, and they were a lot less popular. And then again, I did a game. I did. A scaling version of the ballpoint game. And that was again very successful, but for that I needed a few hundred of balls, and again I needed to bring a lots of material if I was doing it at conferences. So for whatever reason, the things that I make with lots of material become more popular than if I make something with paper and scissors and stuff like that. So I need to become better at finding other ways of dealing with that. Because like you say, traveling, it's so much harder. It's insane. Traveling with Legos at security is really, really fun. They really don't understand it, that you bring a suitcase full of Lego and then some computers with you, because of course I still have computers with me and iPads and whatever, and I get lots of difficult questions, because where do I go with that material? That's always fun, and going through security with Lego.
Well,
but we digest it in all kinds of directions, which is a little bit what most of our conversations happening, I would say, Mark.
I think it's safe to say that's what I ask my wife, and I think she'll say that's probably the difficult thing with me.
Right, but it's both the difficult, maybe, but also the fun part, I would say.
I hope who's on the receiving end.
Exactly. Well, let's hope people are still here, and if they are, let's leave a comment what you liked or disliked about this video. Mark, if people want to contact you, what is the best way to to get in touch with you? You already said you're no longer on Facebook. You're no longer on Twitter. What is a good way to
So
contact you?
I have a website, agilepainrelief.com. So that's the easy part. That's also where the glossary is, agilepainrelief.com/glossary. Easy
Mm-hmm.
part. Okay. I'm on, for social media, I do LinkedIn. Probably the more fun one is Mastodon.
I didn't prepare Mastodon because I did prepare LinkedIn. The reason with Mastodon is I have the feeling that it's used, but at the same time it doesn't get much traction. So I'm always in doubt if I need to prepare it.
We'll throw it into the comments or something on the video.
Yeah, definitely. And I didn't think about your website earlier today. I should have thought about it because indeed, like you said, the glossary is there. But I'll add that in the show notes as well.
Awesome. For what it's worth, what I found on Mastodon, I get better quality conversations.
Well, they do remind me of some of the earlier conversations that we both of us we had together on Twitter. I would say,
sure.
In that sense, I do agree. There is something, but yeah, maybe it's a little bit like you said before. We got addicted to Twitter and lots of interactions. The hard part for me on Mastodon is. It really depends on what server you are for the kind of conversations you have. That is something that I still haven't figured out that much.
Maybe. I think it's more about who you follow and who follows you. I'm regularly getting comments on. So I've been playing around as part of our 3% better idea. I've been playing around talking about backlog refinement for the past month on Mastodon. I regularly get interaction from a lot of the early agile people.
Right.
I get a lot of comments from Brian Marick. Will happily boost nearly everything I write about this, and then he'll comment. And he's, even if we disagree on a minor detail, it's like, yeah, even if we disagree, I can see where he's coming from. He's on point. And people I've never met will then comment on stuff because Brian's boosted it. People I've never met will comment on it. So I'm getting better quality conversation. And I'm hearing from a lot of other old friends. I mean, you must know Janet Gregory. So Janet Gregory pops up from time to time. Joe Rainsberger, or JB Rainsberger, as you mentioned, he pops in. I'm getting a lot of interaction from people who have retreated away from LinkedIn and from other places.
Well, you mentioned indeed the three kind of people that are, I would say, moved over to Mastodon and indeed get some of that. Maybe I should give it again more attention because, like you said, exactly. Well, I've noticed that I don't have much fun on Twitter these days. That's for sure. But yeah, I've been looking where could I go again. So we'll definitely do that. Hang out there on that new space, on Mastodon and on other places where we can go again. It's been again a fun conversation. All what I was hoping for. Like I said earlier on, I was tired of having a lot of conversations these days. But as I was hoping, I still have lots of energy after talking to you. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. I had no idea what to expect, but this was awesome. Thank you.
Well, yeah, that's the interesting part. I also have no idea what to expect, even if I have now done more than 90 of these. It still is lots of fun doing this, talking with different people, some that I've never met and others that I've known for years. And it's always fun, but it's always rather unpredictable in what direction the fun will go. And for me, some of the things were predictable in the sense that what we're going to talk a lot about books, that was predictable. But other than that, it went in all kinds of directions. So I'm really happy with that. So thank you for that.
Awesome. And now I just need to, so clearly the next time I plan to cross the pond to attend a conference, before I do, I need to contact you to see if you will be available for the same conference so that I can see more people.
We can hang out. Exactly. Well, and if you ever plan to go to Belgium, you know that I invite you to my house.
Thank you. I appreciate that. my wife is currently focused on Croatia for our next vacation.
Right. Well, that's a
bit of a walk to Belgium.
Yeah, I would not go walking there. That's definitely not. But it's a good country to go visit. It's a nice country to visit.
So Belgium is a couple of years away, and the selling point that I used to have for Belgium, the rest of the world has started to catch up. It used to be I could say to my wife, "Well, look, they have more beers than there are days in a year to drink them."
That's definitely true. That's definitely true. But we're getting better at exporting them, and and working in other countries to have more beers there. But actually, I'm the wrong kind of person. Like I said, I don't drink alcohol. I'm not the kind of person that can help you with that. Except that I know some of the places where we have we can drink a lot of beers. So I can definitely advise you something.
The amount I drink has diminished considerably in the past 10 years. Not quite as far as you, but down a great deal.
Well, but anyway, hanging out would be fun. Whatever beverages we have, like we said.
Awesome. So I just have to. So quick, let's get the Scrum Alliance to schedule the European gathering, the one after Amsterdam in Belgium, and that'll make it a done deal. You'll be almost obligated.
That's a good. I already feel obligated to go to one of the next Scrum gatherings, but if it's in Belgium, I definitely have no excuse left anymore. Yeah. So, well, like I said, it's been fun. Let's make sure that we meet again once we're somewhere rather near.
Awesome. Fantastic. Cheers.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.